In Buyer's Guide 101, we're going to give you a foundation for success. We're going to take you from thinking about buying a home to getting the keys. And part of that process, part of that journey is getting in the right mindset, knowing that you are able to purchase one, believing that you're going to be able to purchase a new home, and also having your money in order. And having Kris here from Weninger Mortgage, Fairway Independent Mortgage in Beaver Dam, is the perfect person to help guide us through how to manage that money, how to get in that right mindset so that we are going to be successful not only purchasing the home, but getting that mortgage at a really good rate. And I think that's really important. When we talk about the strategy of being in that right mindset, what are a few of the things that we should do before we talk to the lender just to get started? The basics.
Basics. Great place to start. There's three things we kind of take a look at right away. We're going to take a look at income, we're going to take a look at credit, and we're going to take a look at your down payment. As far as for the customer themselves, they should know their limits. Take a look at, okay, what should my maximum payment be? What do I feel comfortable with in a payment? And also as far as for a purchase price. And if you don't know what that purchase price means as far as correlation between your maximum payment, that's okay. As far as myself, a lender can help you with that. So again, know your limits.
Know your limits and also know your lifestyle. You may be approved for a $500,000 house, but that might mean that you can't go on vacation next year, or you can't get married next year, or whatever the case may be. You know, there's other things other than just your house in your life. So figure out how that's going to fit into your budget and get into that right mindset. Before we get to the lender, and before we talk to you about rates and mortgage, should I check my credit score and see where I'm at? Is that a good place to start?
It's a great thing as far as for just kind of double checking to see kind of where I'm at. Do I need to fix anything? Do I need to adjust anything? Do I need to open up any new debt, or do I need to pay some debt off? In addition to the biggest thing that I want to kind of focus on with this segment here is your budget. The money coming in versus the money going out. I have to tell you the story. When I first started quite some time ago, I had a customer, and her biggest thing is, Kris, I need to have my nails done. I'm like, that's okay. Whatever it is, let's throw it in your budget. So we put that into her budget, and we were able to come up with a great payment for her. She proceeded to find a house that was perfect for her needs. A couple years later down the road, and she goes, I'm happy in my house, and I'm happy with my nails. So that's a great success story. So it doesn't matter if it's the cup of coffee that you need every day, if it's getting your nails done, if it's going out golfing, whatever it is, throw it in your budget. So in essence, you can account for it. Because we're all creatures of habit, John, right?
Right.
And we love to have our thing. So whatever your thing is, account for it and make sure that you can afford it moving forward into your new house.
Yeah, and living your best life means having those things in your life. It doesn't mean just making a house payment. It means making a house payment, being able to golf, get your nails done, whatever those things are, so that you can live a fulfilled life. And also know that we talked a little bit in the other episodes, when you purchase a home, you're the landlord. So when the water heater goes out, when that oven goes out, the dryer goes out, you're going to be responsible for that. So not spending every penny on a house payment is a good idea, to have a little bit of money in reserve.
Well, you take a look at, ideally, can we have anywhere from 3 to 6 months of mortgage payments in reserves? 6 is ideal. Is it realistic? A little bit different for everybody, but at the end of the day, we want you to feel comfortable with the payment that you have, because I usually like to say it's not what the lender tells you can afford, it's what you feel comfortable with. And if you're not quite sure on that, you need to do some studying. Take a look at, as far as for your budget, what did you spend the money on over the last 3 to 6 months? Take a look at what money's coming in, because at the end of the day, you need to make sure that more money's coming in versus going out.
Missy, when we talk about the mindset, what is that winning mindset to succeed? If you're just thinking about a home, what can you do to get started?
Well, you can start thinking about what kind of home you want, what areas you're looking at, and think about your budget. Can you afford that new home? Are you, what are you paying in rent right now that you're already comfortable with? Could you add a couple hundred more? Being a homeowner is very different from being in an apartment where you can just call your landlord and say, oh, the water heater broke or the faucet's leaking. You're going to be the one responsible. So make sure you're thinking about all those things in your budget. You might not be able to take that trip this year, but maybe you could take it in a couple years with some savings and some budgeting. You just have to find what your priorities are.
Step 1 is getting in that right mindset. Step 2 is seeking a lender. What should we look for in finding a lender? Is it just the best rate?
I would like to say, you kind of get what you pay for. At the end of the day, the old sales adage. You want to make sure that the lender that you're working with is going to be working in your best interest. That explains, that educates you. There's so many moving parts on these loans today. You want to make sure that you know exactly what's going on. In addition to, you want to make sure that you know all your loan options. Certain lenders don't have all the first-time home buyer programs. So you want to make sure that you educate yourself. And not only that, have your lender educate you. There should be no dumb questions when it comes to buying a house.
So I hear when I was talking to some lenders, I hear different things on radio ads. Get pre-qualified, get pre-approved. Are they the same thing? What's the difference?
Great question. So let's break it down. Pre-qualified. All that means is you're talking to someone over the phone, giving them the general information as far as I make this much, I have this much in debt, and then kind of give you an idea, you know what, I think you can afford this amount of money. That's without looking at any details at all. In today's world, or at any world, when you want to buy a house, you want to get pre-approved. And you're like, what does that mean? That means sending in your paycheck stubs, sending in your W-2s, sending in all your income documentation, sending in your down payment documentation. We want to know, or I want to know as a lender, as far as what exactly do I have? Are you really truly making $24 or $30 an hour? Or is it only $18 an hour? That's quite a bit of a difference. So in going a little bit more elaborate on as far as for pre-approval, you want to take a look at all those income documents, and a great step is get that underwriter to okay it as far as you have this amount of money to use as far as for your monthly payments. It's going to equate to this amount of money as far as for a purchase price. Therefore, you and your real estate agent can feel confident when you're out shopping that you're looking at the right price range.
Right price range is important, and a pre-approved letter is what a buyer or a seller wants in order to get the deal. So if you go in with a pre-qualified letter, that's not the same muscle or the same value as a pre-approved letter.
Exactly. Especially in today's market, they really want to take a look at what does that letter all say, what wording is in there, what has all been approved so far. So if you can follow up with a great letter, and then as far as for myself as another lender, we're doing letters of recommendation, and we're calling the listing agent and explaining what we do. We want to put our buyers in the best light, especially with many offers that are coming in to
competitive
these
market.
homes.
Yeah, you have to have an advantage, and so you're going to go to bat for the buyer and make sure they have everything they need.
Be selling that buyer.
Yes, got to sell that buyer. So what other variables should a buyer know about?
This is quite a detailed list. Know, if you're renting right now, know when your lease is due. What does that mean? Okay, I need to be out by this month. Do I have to give a 30-day notice, or I have to give a 60-day notice? Find out all the little details. The devil's in the details, as you like to say.
So you're talking about the lease. If you're a renter right now and you want to go buy a home, you want to know what deal you're in.
Correct.
Before you go buy, so that you don't get stuck paying, double payments or something like that.
Exactly. Kind of you want to find out as far as when is that lease going to be due, and then when is that mortgage payment going to start up to try to avoid double payments. We try to avoid it. If not, just be aware of it, so then you can account for that in your budget.
Would that change your ability to get a loan if you are in a lease for a year?
Because in essence, if you're looking at buying in June, and if you have to pay rent until December, we need to account for, gosh, you got 6 months of rent payments that you have to pay. It is.
That's a lot. So you got to know your deal. You got to know where you're at, and then how many days notice you'd have to give. What about employment? Can I just say that I'm employed, or do I got to make some proof?
In today's world, we're going to verify it, not only right away when you apply for it, but actually 3 days prior to closing. We do what is called a verbal verification of employment. Typically, most lenders are doing that, and they call up and they make sure you're still employed. So don't quit your job during the process at all.
Don't get fired.
Don't get fired.
Yeah.
Don't get
all
fired.
right. No pressure, but
Yes.
don't get fired. Okay.
Certain situations, we have customers that are like, hey, Kris, I found this job. It's a great job. Hey, I found this promotion. It would be at a more money, but it's at a different location. So the biggest thing, you need to communicate with your lender, because I usually like to say, as far as for lenders, we're kind of private investigators in a way, because we're going to find out in the end, and we want to know about it ahead of time versus 3 days prior to closing. That's a rough call to make, to say, did you just quit your job?
And I think that's an important point. If you change jobs, so if you go from the same job, is that going to, you're probably going to be able to keep your loan if you're kind of in that space, right?
Mm-hmm. Typically, if you're moving from the same job, making more, getting a promotion, where we run into situations where if you're an hourly or salary employee and you're going to a commission-based, that's going to be a problem. If you're going from an hourly or salary job and you're going to a temporary agency, that's going to be a problem.
Okay.
And the biggest thing too, if you're going to become self-employed, we better hold the horses, because that's a total different ball game when in essence you're a W-2 employee to go to self-employment.
Yeah, so self-employed is going to be a big hurdle. And what if you're if you're an accountant and then all of a sudden you become an actor? If you change professions, that would be a big deal too, right?
That'd be a big deal, because they take a look at stability of income. As a lender, they take a look at as far as what risks do we have in giving this loan, and in essence, what layers of risk do we have in a loan. So therefore, that would be a huge layer of risk, because as far as the stability, as far as for being an actor.
They're broke. Yeah, that would
Okay.
never work. So that's a great example. Accountants, they make money and actors don't, but they're happy inside, and so that's really important. Do you have student loans? If you have those student loans, how does that play into getting your mortgage?
Right now, due to COVID, the student loans are pretty much on a stay. That's going to be coming out at the end of September. So we need to take into consideration, what is that payment going to be? What is it going to look like? Are you going to be in an income-based repayment program, or is it going to go in the full repayment, because it's going to affect your budget? So if you do have student loans, I really encourage you to think about that ahead of time. Take a look at as far as what that looks like and how it's going to affect your budget.
Now that we've decided to use a buyer's agent and have our own representation, what does that home shopping experience look like? I know you're going to be available 24/7, but what happens? How do you buy a house?
Well, there's several resources for buying a house. As an agent, I'm going to first of all set you up on our local MLS and get you set up in the parameters that we discussed, which neighborhood, which price range, what type of home you're looking for, so that as soon as something hits the market, that buyer is going to get email. So something goes on the market at 2 o'clock, they're going to get email by 2:30 if this hit the market.
And let's jump off here. So the MLS listing, there's some type of mechanism that as soon as we get listings, to be the first one there, you're going to get an email so that you can get there first, right?
Right. Because sometimes now syndication's great. It goes to Zillow, Trulia, all those things, but they're not as fast as the main MLS, because that's where the realtors put in their listing and it hits there first, and then it goes out to thousands of real estate websites.
So Zillow's not the fastest place to find a listing. Okay.
No.
So you want to have MLS emails to be one of the first people to see that house. So that's super important. So write that down. Okay. So what's the next step after we get those emails?
You're going to, if you start looking through them and you see something that interests you, then you're going to contact me or your buyer's agent and say, hey, there's this house on 123 Main Street. I mean, you could text me, call me. I want to see that. Great. What's your availability? When can you go? I'm here for you. I might do some research on it before we get there. I'll print up the stats, look at the condition report, make sure there's no major issues that they're disclosing. Some of my clients like to do a drive-by and see if they like the neighborhood, but not necessary. And then I just set up appointments depending on their schedule and the seller's schedule as well. Sometimes if it's occupied, sometimes they need 24-hour notice. So we're going to set up some showings.
So as a buyer, you can't just see a listing and then run over to the house. You got to go through you, make sure that we have an appointment so that you can show the house. So when you're showing the house, I mean, if you've never done this before, what can and can't you do once you're inside the house as far as looking around? Can you pull back a panel on the wall, or what? What are the rules here?
Okay, so there's some rules. I treat it like it would your own house. Take off your shoes, or they have these booties out. We're not going to be removing any panels or removing that's fixed. You're free to, open closets, look in cabinets, see the quality of cabinets. We search around the entire house inside and walk around the outside. We'll walk through the basement. Here in Wisconsin, most every house has a basement. And I personally try to look for the exposed areas. I'm not looking for how cute the basement is. I'm looking for cracks and issues like that.
Water damage.
Mm-hmm. Looking to see if the mechanicals are up to date or how old those are, pointing those things out to the buyer.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody is looking at a home, maybe when they're walking through the kitchen, they could just mention to the listing agent, hey, can I open the cabinets, and just kind of get that permission. And your skill is you're going to not only open up the cabinets, but you're going to look under the sink to see if there's water damage from the sink being broken or the gasket on the garbage disposal being broken. And you've been doing this so long that you're going to see that's water damage that's painted over. That's a crack that's just spackled over or something in the basement, which would be a big red flag if the foundation's broken and there's water coming in, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
As an experienced agent, I know what to look for, some red flags that might come up in an inspection. Obviously, I want them to still have a home inspection, but I at least can point out some issues that might be coming up, and they might choose not to write on that house and write an offer.
Yeah, and I think your experience comes into play when you're looking at that house. If you're a first-time home buyer, you may not know to look up at the rafters in the basement and see if those beams are in good shape, and look for those cracks, look for that water damage, look for any type of infestation from things getting in the house that shouldn't be there, and you can keep an eye out for those. So the house is looking good. The appliances seem to be in order. The garbage disposal is not leaking. The bathroom's solid, or the basement's solid. Now, what is the next step? We love the house. How am I going to buy this house?
Okay, so I'm going to go write them an offer. We're going to discuss the terms. It's all done electronic these days, so it's not like you have to be right in person. They could go home and think about it. I'm not a high pressure person. I want them to go and think about it. Give me a call, and then we're going to go over some terms.
So who's going to think about it?
The
buyer. The buyer's going to go home and think about it. Then they're going to call you and say, here's how much money I want to give them.
Yes.
And then you're going to do some electronic correspondence with the seller directly or with the seller's agent?
First of all, I'm going to be writing an offer for the buyer's behalf, with the terms they want, and we'll discuss each part of it. What contingencies do they want? Do they want an inspection, which I recommend for new buyers? Is it financed? Do they have their pre-approval? They probably already got it to me ahead of time. And appraisal needs to be on there if there's financing contingency. When are they looking to close? With lenders, it's right around 45 days. Cash buyers, it's a little quicker, but sometimes people need, because of their lease terms, they might need the 60 days. So I can help negotiate all that stuff. Also, earnest money. Earnest money is what a buyer would put down when they have an accepted offer, whether it's $1,000, $3,000. A trust account is going to hold on to that with the title company or with the listing agent, and that gets credited when it is sold.
That's a good jumping off point. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to discuss the terms that the buyer feels comfortable in buying this house before it's presented to the seller.
Exactly.
And then the second thing is we're going to discuss that earnest money. Now that's kind of a sticky situation, especially new home buyers probably. The first-time home buyers a lot of times don't have a lot of money. So when you talk about how much money should I put down, I guess it varies by the way that the market is going. But talk a little bit about earnest money. If I put $5,000 down or $10,000 down, do I get that money back, or is that too much money, or what's the right amount?
Usually it's right around that 1%. So if it's a $100,000 house, you're looking at like $1,000 earnest money. That's
Okay.
a good rule of thumb. That money you would get back at closing as part of your down payment. So usually home buyers have 5%, 3%, whatever money's saved aside to buy this home,
Mm-hmm.
and then that will get credited at closing as part of their down payment. Now, if something happens with the offer along the way and the buyer decides, this inspection came up with so much stuff, seller's not going to fix it, I want to walk away, then you would get your earnest money back.
And you're going to facilitate that return of the
Yes.
money so that,
Yes.
because that sometimes gets sticky if things go
Exactly.
bad, and that's why you need that representation,
Yes.
so that if it goes south, that you're going to get those thousands of dollars back. I think that's really important. Okay, so we found the right mindset. That's the beginning. We went to Kris. Kris got us pre-qualified. We just spent all this time looking for houses. We looked at this house. It's perfect. The buyer and you have sat down and talked about the terms of purchasing this home. Now it's time to write an offer. You've talked about the terms. How does that offer process actually work? Like, who gives them the offer? You said it happens electronically.
Yes.
And how long do they have? How long do you have to sit there, wait on pins and needles for that to get that house? What does that look like?
Usually I do some investigating on that. If I know they're going to put an offer in, I'll call the listing agent, find out when are they presenting offers. So if it's a Friday listing, they might be presenting Sunday, or maybe they're just presenting offers to the seller as soon as they come in.
Good
so
point.
I try to find that out. Now, if they're presenting as soon as they come in, I usually do like less than 24 hours for them to get back to us. So I'm going to put that offer together on Wisconsin state contract forms, or whatever state you're in, and the buyer is going to review and sign it, and then I present it to the listing agent. The listing agent's responsible for presenting it to the seller.
And how long does that take? I mean, could you find out right away, or do you have to wait a week, or what does that look like?
There's actually like a date on the contract that you can say, so today is May 20th. Let's say I wrote an offer today. I could say needs to respond by May 21st. There's set dates on the contract for everything. For inspections, appraisals, there's set dates on there.
That's a key point, is everything on these contracts is very detailed down to the date, so you don't have to wonder
Right.
when these responses are coming back. Maybe we should step back. How can we make an offer that's going to be a winner? How can we be successful in creating a really good offer? I've heard a lot of gimmicks. Write them a letter, send them a picture of your dog,
right.
buy them a trip to Jamaica. What can we do to make that offer great?
There's some these days that are saying right in the comments in the MLS, no, please send no letters.
Oh, wow.
Because I think that's becoming such a thing right now, and
Yeah.
some people are like, I just don't want the letter.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, depending on what's going on in the market, right now today, people are dropping contingencies. They might drop the inspection. Now, first-time homebuyers, like I said, I just don't believe in that. I really think an inspection is a good thing to do, unless you're very well versed. Maybe you're a builder or a contractor and you know a lot about those things. But people are dropping that contingency. They're also dropping, if they have financing, they're dropping the appraisal contingency. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be an appraisal, because the lenders want that appraisal. But let's say an appraisal comes in lower than the asking price or the selling price. Let's say that appraisal comes in lower than the selling price. What they're doing is now dropping that contingency, saying that they're still going to take that property and come up with the cash. Because the lender will not finance that, let's say it's $10,000 difference. So that buyer is now assuming the responsibility to pay that difference.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's what's happening in today's market.
Mm-hmm.
But in the past, most people are marking all those check boxes, radon tests, well and water tests if it's on a well and septic. It just depends on what's going on in the market in that area and how new is that property in the market.
What exactly is an offer to purchase, and what does it all encompass?
Sure. So an offer to purchase is one side saying to the other, almost always it's the buyer offering to the seller, it doesn't have to be that way, that these are the terms upon which I will buy this property. So this is how much I'm going to buy it for, this is how long I'm going to wait until I finalize the transaction, this is the way I'm going to pay you. And these are all the terms. This is what I expect to be included with the property. This is the information I want before I finalize this transaction. And these are the contingencies. So these are sort of my ways out if something goes in a way that I don't expect it's going to go.
And in a tough market, we're seeing the contingencies being dropped out. What's your opinion on that?
Well, my opinion as an attorney is that's a legally risky situation. You have a lot of people buying property as is, where they're not getting inspections. They're buying property without giving themselves an out for financing. So they're basically saying, I guarantee you I'm going to get financing for this property, and if I don't, it's my problem and not yours.
So what happens if they don't get financing?
The worst thing that happens is they get sued, and the seller of the property sues them and says, hey, you told me you're buying this property for this amount. We don't care if your bank said no. That wasn't part of the deal.
Yeah.
You got to buy it.
You got to make it happen. So what are the things we should look for in an offer to purchase?
Well, what we want to look for is we want to, the basics are easy. And the way that offers to purchase work is you really find the basics primarily on the very first page. And those are things that, for the most part, you're going to be able to understand relatively easily. What you want to look for is the devil in the details. You want to look for what contingencies there are on that, what additional agreements are being requested. So, I've had agreements as strange as a horse being included in an offer to purchase, or the right to live. Maybe the seller says, I'll sell it to you, but I want to have the right to live there for a period of time after the sale.
Yeah.
You better be aware of what those things say, because just because something's traditionally done means absolutely nothing once you have a written offer that lays it out.
If you have a buyer's agent and you already have that representation, how do you fit into that scenario?
Sure. Most commonly, the way I fit in is the agent will actually send clients to me and say, this is a legal matter, you got to talk to a lawyer about this, because your realtor will tell you they're realtors. Their specialty is selling and buying real estate and advising people in that process. But if we're getting into more hairy legal issues about easements or rights or contingencies, you're going to want to talk to a lawyer about that, because those things are going to touch parts of your life beyond real estate. If we're talking about avoiding litigation, that's something you should be seeing a lawyer at. So a lot of times I'll get referred by realtors, and sometimes people will contact me and say, I'm not sure my realtor has this whole thing covered, I want you to take a look at it too.
So in the purchasing process, what are some of the things you said? Easements. What are a couple of the other indicators that would say we need to have a legal representation look at this?
Sure. If there is another contract attached to it. So
what would that contract be?
So for example, there's a tenant in the property, and there's a lease that we got to look at and say, okay, what are your rights as far as getting out of that lease? If there are specific terms about what happens with the inspection report. Sometimes where you have an inspection contingency, and what happens if there's a problem on the inspection. Sometimes those terms can get really complicated. Who has to pay? Can people back out? Sometimes it's if there's a problem on the inspection, the buyer has to pay for it and they can't back out. Well, what's the point of the inspection if that's the terms?
Yeah. You talked about a lease. If there's a lease on the property, maybe a tenant, you're buying a multifamily. If you buy a property and somebody's leasing that second-story unit, you have to honor that lease, or can you just buy it and just say, I'm the new owner, the lease is no longer?
That lease is with the property. So if that's a written lease, you gotta honor that, at least to the extent of understanding how you can terminate that lease.
Can an offer to purchase be changed?
It can, but it can't by one side.
Okay.
So we very often, it's a pretty common procedure. For example, the financing's taking a little longer, or the inspection didn't get done on time, and both sides will sign an amendment to the offer to purchase. Very commonly done, not a big deal. but both sides have to sign it. The sticky situations that I see in my practice are either both sides verbally agree and nothing ever gets put in writing, and then somebody gets riled up about something else and tries to use this, or one side just proceeds doing whatever they want and has run afoul of the offer to purchase. And now what do we do?
Right, but now what do you do? If let's say you decide just for whatever reason you don't like blue houses anymore and you bought a blue house, can you just get out of the offer to purchase, or are you stuck in it?
Typically you can't, and that's why when we draft up these offers to purchase, we put in contingencies for different things. The more common contingencies are you can get out of it if you can't get financing. You can get out of it if the house that you need to sell to buy it doesn't sell. And then the inspection. You can get out of it if there's some major issue on the inspection. Once in a while, there will be something in an offer to purchase called a right to rescind, where the buyer essentially gets 5 days or 10 days or whatever it is to change their mind for any reason or for no reason. But absent that, you really can't just decide not to.
You said you can get out of an offer to purchase if there's something major wrong with the inspection. Who determines major, and how does that get deciphered?
Sure, great question. So what we see is on these offer to purchase, essentially the full second page of the offer to purchase is a list of all the things that are material conditions affecting the property. So if something's wrong with those things, those would allow you to say this is a major issue, and if the offer is written correctly, you can get yourself out of that contract. Now, if you get an inspection but there's no inspection contingency, it doesn't matter what that inspection finds. So you got to have the contract written correctly in the first place.
So if it is your forever home, it is your dream home, get the legal representation to make sure that all the devil's in the details.
Yes.
And we make sure that everything is checked so that when you get your house, it doesn't fall apart on you. Thanks so much, Al. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. The offer has been accepted. Now what? What do we do from the lender's standpoint? Missy has gone back and forth between the seller and made sure all the contingencies are done. The seller said, yes, we're going to do it. The buyers paid their earnest money. Missy's going to look out for that to make sure that that's taken care of. What happens on your end?
Great question. We're going to take a look at that contract in detail. We're going to take a look at how soon do we need the appraisal back? How soon is loan commitment due? We're going to get in touch with that buyer right away to make sure, do you have your homeowner's insurance set and ready to start the day of closing? What documentation are we going to need, if anything, in additional to? Also, if there's a home inspection, we want to make sure that that gets scheduled, that gets done, and that it passes. In additional to, if we need an appraisal, we want to make sure that that gets scheduled. So if you're thinking timing is crucial when it comes to having that accepted offer. The faster we can start in on it, the faster we can get to the closing table.
And having this representation, having this help from you and Missy is going to be so valuable, because I'm thinking if I'm buying a house, I'm not thinking about inspection and all these details and checklists and all these things. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with the yard. And I'm thinking what I'm going to paint, the shutters, and what my first barbecue is going to look like. I'm not thinking about all these things that you're talking about. That's it's boring, kind of a pain in the butt stuff, but it's got to be done. So you really need someone like you and someone like Missy to handle all of those details to make sure this gets done. So the inspection is done. Okay. The inspection is done, the appraisal is done, we got our checklist done, you're going through all that documentation. What happens next?
We're going to take all that information, we're going to send it to our underwriter, and as far as for getting what is called final approval or loan commitment. In your contract, we only have a certain amount of time to get that loan commitment. And the commitment is the lender's part in saying, yes, we're ready to close on this loan. So we need to make sure that we meet those contract deadlines. The faster we can get it, it sets everybody at ease, and then we're able to schedule closing. And then we just wait for closing to happen.
And closing's just meeting at the lender's office or the title office. But when we get that commitment to loan, is that locking in a rate?
Great question. Depending upon what lender you choose, you can lock into a rate possibly at any time once you have the accepted offer. In most cases, the rate is going to go with an address. In certain cases, we do have a lock-in option where you can lock into a rate and then in essence pick your address in the future. So depending upon your situation and depending upon what lender you choose, typically we're able to take up to a 60-day rate lock for that specific address. Not that we're going to take 60 days to close, but in essence, when we talk about rate lock, what does that mean? It means that I am contracting that amount of money forward for you to set aside, so at the closing day I'm able to wire that money to the title company to disperse to that seller.
What's the advantages and disadvantages? The advantage would be if the rate goes up, you want to lock that rate. And then, so it's kind of a little bit of a gamble. It's like, what's going to happen over the next 2 months? Is it going to go up or down, and do I want to lock it in or roll the dice?
You know, at the end of the day, I think working with a reputable person, lender, and taking a look at, okay, if I lock it in today, this is what it's going to be. If rates go up at 8th, this is what's going to be. And then you take a look at, it's a calculated risk that you're going to need, that you're going to take. You know, is it better for you to lock it in and not having to worry about it, or do you want to kind of roll the dice and see where that's at, and then lock it in during that time period? Typically, we're going to want to have that lock in anywhere from 2 weeks to 1 week prior to closing, because we need to finalize things. We need to get a lot of paperwork set ahead of time.
Yeah, and with the rates so low right now, you want to lock in that rate because, you know, like we talked about a little bit earlier, the rates can fluctuate based on the different things that the Fed does and the market. And
earlier this year, we had a sway where it moved anywhere from 0.5% to 0.25%, depending upon the loan program you're in. That's a very big sway in one day, and there are a lot of people that were very unsettled by that.
Yeah. Kris gave us some great information on what that looks like from the lender's side. Now, she ordered the appraisal. You're ordering the inspector?
Usually the buyers get that on their own.
Okay.
I might give them some guidance on what to look for, who to call, but they hire them. And then we all go together. Like myself as a buyer's agent, the buyer and the inspector are there, not the seller. It's just the buy side that's there looking at all the elements of the home.
We're a go. Things are working well. But what if something's wrong with the inspection? What if there's, a leaky something? There's
usually something. It's pretty rare if you find something that's a total clean report. That is the inspector's job, is to find everything that's wrong. Some things might not be a very big deal to buyers. Some are bigger deals. That's also my job, is to kind of go through the report once we have it. Safety things, electrician stuff. I always like to have them get that addressed. So I go through the report with them, find out what are their top things that are concerning to them. And that's another negotiation point in the process, where having that buyer's agent is very important. We're going to go through the things that are important to them and write what's called an amendment and go back. I'm going to take this and go back to the listing agent with their list of repairs, demands, whatever you want to call it.
The closing process has taken place. We're in title. What happens after that with your connection with the buyer? Is the buyer sending the payments to you, or how does that work?
Great question. So after closing, we take a look at, as far as for Fairway Mortgage in the state of Wisconsin, you're making your payment to Fairway Mortgage. Unless we're getting a state bond program, the WIDA program, then they're going to pay directly to WIDA. What's nice is that they're able to make their payments by regular check if they would like to, or they'll get a monthly statement in the mail, or they can jump online and have auto sweeps taken from their account, or if they want to, they can go in and take it from their account themselves, or we even have an app now, which is great. It's being very useful.
So you have 4 different ways to pay, and it can meet people where they're at, because everybody's a little bit different. I don't own a check. Like, to find when I have to write one, it's like a search to dig through my house. So to pay online and pay electronically is just
swipe it up.
That's swipe it and pay it. This has been very useful. We've been sent in for final review, and we have commitment to close. Now we need to walk the property before we get to that closing time. What does that look like? Do we just stop over and take a look, or do we have to check with you, or what happens?
Well, with myself as your buyer's agent, we're going to schedule that. Usually it's the day before closing, the morning of closing, and we're going to just go check and make sure there was no fire, flood damage when they moved out. Make sure if there was some repairs that they were doing, they sent us the receipts, kind of make a note, make sure that it was done. It's a quick 10-minute thing usually. Sometimes I have buyers that bring their tape measure and see where they're going to place some furniture. It's usually a pretty exciting day.
Yeah, it's exciting. And just check for the little things, did they take the refrigerator out and, stuff like that. At closing, how does that happen? How does that look? Are you there? Is Kris there? Who's in the room? Do we have to go somewhere? Is it done online? What happens?
So closing is done usually at the buyer's lender's office or the buyer's title company, whoever the lender's using for a title company. We used to be, years ago, like when I bought my first house, it was done all by attorneys, and it was 3-4 hour process. Now it's usually less than an hour. There's a representative from the title company there. I attend my buyers' closings as well. Sometimes the lender comes. It's not as customary, but sometimes they're there. And then the buyers are there. And they're going to go through the lender paperwork. They're going to go through the closing documents, the deed transfer. They're going to run through the numbers with the buyers, and they're going to get the keys.
They get the keys and they own the house.
And then that's when they get it and they can move in that day.
They can move in and they have their new home. The offer's been accepted. They are a successful home buyer, and that is the process of buying a house, from thinking about it to getting the keys and moving in. Thank you so much for joining us again, Missy.
Always a pleasure.
And we'll see you next week.